Thank you everyone for joining me. I have Ryan Sallans here. Ryan is a speaker, a consultant, and he is an author. He has written several books and we expect more books from him in 2022. So let's go ahead and get started. Ryan, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, first, Michelle, thank you so much for reaching out and for having me on your show. To everybody listening, so my name is Ryan Sallans, and I am a transgender man, meaning that I was born assigned female, but at age 25, age 25 back in May of 2005, I started my transition from female to male in Lincoln, Nebraska. Um, my transition has shaped and formed what I do now in this world to try to help other people, not only people who also either identify as transgender or are exploring their gender and sexuality, but also people that want to be supportive of their children, of their coworkers.
Including them in that, I think is kind of, it makes everything come full circle.
It does. And really, what I'm finding in this work, Michelle, is that the most powerful thing in it is when you're able to reach families and start being that catalyst or that wedge to be able to help them start working and healing from their past actions with one another. So, because I see it in my own family and how we've all grown so much, and we're really in this state right now. My parents are 76. My brother's 50, my sister's 43, 44. I'm almost 42. So it's like we are really starting to come full circle again and join together as a family and create new stories with one another that go past the mistreatment from our past.
Wow, that is so powerful that you said that. Now, what was it like going into that transition and coming out of the painful memories and coming out of the painful experiences? How did you manage yourself, your emotions in that time?
Cry. I cried a lot. And I still cry, which is really amazing, actually. I would say the first 15 years of my transition, into my transition. So I transitioned now 16 years ago, which I can't believe that. Like, how does time go this fast, right? The first 15 years, I wasn't able to cry. And us trans men, I say us trans men, we always talk about, well, maybe it's testosterone that makes our tear ducts smaller or something. But I just think it's in a transition when you experience rejection, on top of other forms of rejection you already had, it makes you shut down in a way. And it makes it very difficult to tap into those feelings and emotions that connect with family, because it's just so much confusion and loss that it's hard to be able to, one, know what to do with words around that, but then two, how your body is supposed to interact with that. It's difficult. And I'm finding now that I've released all that past anger and pain, I'm starting to see myself outside of my parents I'm seeing myself as an adult son, an adult man with them that I can tell that they're proud of. So.
Wow, wait a minute. That what you just said right there, you can see yourself now outside of all that pain as a man that they're proud of. Now, do you think that during your transition into coping with being rejected into being accepted, do you think that your perception of the way they loved you could have been a little muddy then?
I think none of us knew what to do because I transitioned during a time where we didn't really see much on trans people. The trans community was very much underground again after the 1980s when the Reagan administration, everything came in, and we started shutting down all the gender clinics at universities and other places that were treating transgender people. They all got shut down. The trans community went underground. And then we are slowly coming back out again. And now it's everywhere to the point where it's too confusing and we're actually losing what it means to be trans at this point, which we can talk about if you want to later. So with my family, I think it's just it was difficult because growing up, I didn't know how I fit in with my family due to just not feeling right and not having the words to know what that was.
How old were you?
2.5 to 3 years old is my first memory of looking out in the world and seeing gender. It happened in the summer We lived in the country. My dad was a chiropractor in my small town, a very successful business, a really good chiropractor. And he had an in-ground pool put in our backyard. So one summer I was standing out there, my mom put me in this bright hot pink bikini. Like, this pink should not be on. It's not good with my complexion. Speaking of which, I feel like my complexion's a little wonky. Maybe that's a little better. Maybe I'm a little bright here. But she put me in this bikini, and I looked at my dad and my brother in their swimming trunks, my mom and sister in their bathing suits, and I proceeded to just take the top part off so that I could have swimming trunks like my dad and my brother. So my awareness was very, very young in age. And on the playground, I always played with the boys until second grade. I was told I had to play with the girls, but then I took on boy roles. Right. And so it was very early awareness, which is what we see with children that actually do transition. You can have that sense of your gender at a very, very young age.
But a lot of times I think the adult world does not view children as people. And as people, you're already made up the way you're going to be from a young age. There are a lot of things about me that haven't changed since I was a kid. I hate stockings. I hate dresses myself. Like, I don't even like any of that. I never have. And it's the way I've always been.
Children are the most wisest beings that we can learn the most from. And I'm learning that the older I get. I used to be scared of children. I would hiss at them. I just joke. I didn't really hiss at them. But that used to be a joke when I'd be on stages. People ask me about having kids, and I'd be like, I hiss at them. They scare me. So I don't feel that way anymore. They actually bring me a lot of joy. And actually, I've been going through a lot of grief recently around the fact that I will never have biological children. I have a lot of grief that I can't pass on my genetics. I'm still okay with that because I wouldn't want to pass on genetics through ovaries. That's just not me. It's just not. In fact, back when I had hysterectomy in 2006, I went through a huge grieving period before having it done because I recognized at age 26, I was letting go of being able to pass on myself, I guess, in a way. But at that time, I was like, I just would not want to do it through ovaries. And to this day, I would not want to do it through ovaries. It was just not my destiny.
How did you find to be so confident in your decisions, even though you had grief? Because I'm a person that believes if I have a conviction about something, my emotions really don't matter, because that conviction it's like the introduction to a purpose to me, in my opinion. So how did you find the confidence to make a decision like that while in grief, while you had no support, while no one was around you to help you? Where did you find your strength?
My inner core, my inner guidance. We began with prayer. So for me, my prayer is just going within and listening, truly listening to myself and not letting other noise clutter what it is that myself is trying to tell me, right? And I learned that through therapy. When I was in college, I became really sick with anorexia nervosa and almost died. And I still struggle with eating disordered brain to this day. Like, I'm actually gonna be doing a lot of writing on this and helping people understand more deeply what eating disorder is versus what the language says it is. Right. That language doesn't mean anything, and that's not helping anybody. It goes much deeper, right. And so for me, through therapy of 6 years of psychotherapy, I was really able to tap further into what I was most fearful of, and that was sexuality. So first coming out as lesbian was my first aha moment of, wow, look at how cool and healing this is for yourself when you actually honor who you are, no matter what other people are gonna think. And then as I was dating a woman and in the community, I'm like, something's not right. That's when I found the book Body Alchemy by Lauren Cameron that showed trans men, photography book of trans men, and it was from my childhood. That's who I'm supposed to be. This is why it's not quite right, And so it was each step I've taken, no matter who's pushing back at me, my romantic partners or family or society. I've been protested by the Westboro Baptist Church. So no matter what.
You were protested by an entire church?
Well, the Westboro Baptist Church. The Westboro Baptist Church, they're pretty extreme folks down in Kansas. The patriarch of it has passed away, and so they've become a lot quieter, but they used to protest everything. They're related to LGBT stuff.
Okay.
And when I say they, there was like 4 of them with their really disgusting signs that just say that we're going to hell and this and that, you know? So there's 150 counter protesters, and they raised money for the Matthew Shepard to raise the Hate Foundation because of the Westboro Baptist Church. So it was actually a really positive thing.
Right. That's normally how it turns out. I am fascinated at your ability to see yourself and make a decision. That's very rare. I don't hear that from very many people. But I think what the missing link is in a lot of people's minds is that you really don't need anyone else's approval. You really don't need anyone else's validation. As a child, when you grew up, would you say that you had complete love? And what I mean by complete is unconditional love from your mom and unconditional love from your dad. What was that relationship like with your parents?
I love my parents to the moon and back. And like when I was a little kid, oh man, I was my dad's shadow. Everywhere he went, I was right there with him, helping him. Anything I could do. I'm a big helper. I like to help a lot. So, yeah, and then my mom, like we would, as a little child, it was just amazing. It really was. I think where we started to come into conflict with one another is the older I got, and the more I was not fitting into their expectations of who I should be as their little girl, you know? My dad would go to Dallas all the time for chiropractic conventions, and he would buy all these frilly dresses because he thought that's what we would like, is to have these frilly dresses, you know, and I would always be put in these things and it just looks so ridiculous. But he was very much operating as trying to be a good father, provide for his family, you know. He was raised with this type of mentality. You put your girls in this and have them act this way, you have your boys do this. So that's where we started to get the tension, is because parents cannot tell kids how to act or who they should be. We have to allow kids to teach us who they are, because they are their own, and we are our own individual, unique beings.
Yes, I totally agree. We have to allow them to teach us who they are. And a lot of times I think there are a lot of psychological issues that develop when you don't allow them to do that and you tell them who they are. And it causes so much separation and a breach in connection in the family unit.
Yeah, it does. Because then you start losing trust. And when you're shamed as a child, that hurts so deeply. It makes you question yourself. And the more that you're shamed, the more deeply you lose sight of yourself, because the people that are supposed to be there to nurture you are not.
Right. It's so amazing. I just did an actual YouTube about shame. I'm gonna post it tomorrow on my channel. But I find that a lot of people that I talk to about their relationship with their parents, my parents were very affirming to me as a child. And I was just like you. It stopped when I no longer fulfilled their expectations. But because I had such a solid structure and foundation with my family, it created the individual in me to stand up on her own. Mm-hmm. Right. And I find that there's a strong correlation there, but you know, it's also helped me to look at them as I am now and their disapproval of me. And I'm like, well, you raised me to be this way. You told me not to be ashamed of anything that I did. That's what my father told me. Hey, Michelle, if you're going to do something, don't be ashamed of it. So I'm not.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Which is great, because look at the light you shine. Like, seriously, it's really so powerful when we are in a space in our lives where we really just step into our voices, step into our bodies, and then connect with one another.
Absolutely. Now, what were your relationships like while you were in transition from in your trans experience? What were your romantic relationships like? Was it hard to have that conversation? Talk about that a little bit.
So I was partnered 8 months prior to realizing I was trans by finding Lauren's book in Boston, Massachusetts in December 2004. I was partnered with a woman named Michelle and we stayed together. And so I was with her for a total of 6.5 years before we broke up. But it was very difficult because she was very much lesbian identified, like radical feminist lesbian identified. Doesn't care if men fall off the face of the planet identified. And then I began a transition. So it was extremely difficult for her to navigate her identity and how she wanted to be seen as a dyke. I'm going to put that in quotations because I know some people can find that. I don't want to be offensive.
I never find that offensive because it's just a word. That's all.
Yeah. Yes, and for her, that's what she wanted the world to see her as. You know, that's very empowering for her.
Right.
And then there's me. And so it was very difficult for us, but we continued moving forward in the relationship. And for me to keep going, I just had to keep reminding myself that, oh man, this is actually really hard to talk about, which is weird. It was just, I don't have the right words. I'm not being eloquent. I apologize for that.
You don't have to be.
Yeah, it was just, we were together when we needed to be together. And then it was time for us to be apart. So, yeah, I don't know why I can't find the words today. That's weird.
So I find that when you're a writer and you can't find the words, sometimes maybe you haven't found the emotion.
Yeah.
Emotion yet. And believe me, I've had relationships that I still haven't found it for. But I think that we're all made, our emotional self is made just like our physical self. When we're ready to handle it, we will. When we're ready to find those words, we can. If not, sometimes I think we don't give ourselves a break, because all that you went through and it was difficult, Ryan, that is amazing. That is such an accomplishment. And in my opinion, if you don't completely define all of the experience, just making it out was enough, right? Like making it past all of that was enough to look back and say, Ryan, you did that, bro.
There was a moment 2 years into our relationship, we bought a house together, and my ex always said we don't need a marriage, we have a mortgage. So that shows one of the conflicts in our relationship. Well, we then, after a couple months of moving in, we separated, and I was starting to detransition, meaning I started shaving all my body hair, my legs again, and I was trying to keep any form of facial hair off. I was starting to lower my dose of testosterone. She had moved out. She was staying with her moms. I went into my doctor's office and told her that I was thinking of detransitioning, and I was beginning the steps, and she said, "Why would you do that?" And I said, "Well, because my girlfriend left me." And she said, "Sounds like you need a new girlfriend then." And it was like that, oh, you're right. I bet there'd be a lot of people who would like to date me. What am I doing? And so it was kind of like, she gave me that boost of confidence to keep going and to know that if my relationship didn't work out, I will be okay. And in fact, for all of us, we should never put our self-worth on a relationship. We should always hold it within ourselves, because we will carry ourselves throughout our life. But this is our life, not someone else's.
Now, what have you experienced in just in everyday life that you can give advice to trans men who are in their beginning stages, how to psychologically deal with not being as rejected to being completely rejected in society? What would you say to them?
Anything that comes from the exterior world that feels hurtful, just recognize that's the exterior world stuff, not your stuff. That's the exterior world's work to process and to figure out. It's not for you to solve for them. Our whole purpose is to be able to go deeper into ourselves and form, those words and that awareness and recognition of who we are, so that each time something comes up against us, we can push it away. Stand our ground, stand firmly in our ground, because we are not labels, we are not language, we are human beings, and we just want to be able to express ourselves to the world in a way we feel comfortable. And in that process, we're going to take risks. So there's a lot of risks in life, and there's a risk with each step you take in a transition, because you never know how people are going to react, right? But they're worth it. It's worth it, because you learn more about who you are with each step that you take.
Right. Wow. And so what would you say to a trans man who walks into the house of his mom and his mom does not address him as he presents himself, because she has an issue with accepting that? What would you tell him to stay away? What would you tell him to do?
Have patience. Patience is a huge key factor in healing relationships, no matter what our issues are or whatever journeys we're taking, right? And if a mom is just not able to use your name or pronouns, or it's just makes comments about how they're grieving or missing something from the past, allow that space, because there's work happening there. And parents need to break down what is happening, because their child with a transition, not only are you physically transitioning your appearance, but you go by, maybe depends on the individual, you go by different names, you go by different pronouns. Like their world is getting flipped on their head because you were not the person that they thought they had and that they were raising. And so it takes time for certain people to really go through that healing process. It took 3 years for my parents to use my name, Ryan, and to use he and him pronouns. It took them 3 years to use it full time, even if I wasn't around. And I needed to give them that space. And now I hang out with them. Like I just went, they've moved to a new home now in a smaller town near my sister. I went yesterday and visited them. My parents, when they talk about my past, they always say Ryan and he, like even when I was a kid, which is so funny because I always, when I talk about my past as a storyteller, I use my previous name and female pronouns. Mm-hmm. And so it's really interesting to see the difference there.
Let me ask you a question. Did you see them trying? Because I do know that there are some families, or there are some trans men who have family members that will never try. What is there to look for? What should a person say to them, to kind of a parameter to put in front of them to say, okay, they're trying, okay, they're not trying?
You can pick up on the energy, I feel, when there's just that grieving moment and the hesitancy and the awkwardness versus just a complete shutdown. Mm-hmm. If someone's completely shut down, and if it's hurting you, separate yourself from that person and exit it. And say, when you're wanting to actually start doing work on this, I will make myself available. Right. But I'm not gonna have myself hurt or put in a situation where I feel completely invalidated by you. I just can't do that, because that's not, I'm doing my work. I need you to do yours.
Absolutely. Now talk to us a little bit about your books. I do know that The Second Son was one of your books, and also Transforming Manhood. Tell us a little bit about those.
So Second Son was released back in 2012, and that's my story of my childhood to adulthood and coming into myself as Ryan. So it goes from childhood all the way through my eating disorder, all the way through college years, into the first 5 years of my transition, and also into my entering into the professional work field versus staying in academia.
Right.
So that covers not only my journey, but it also covers my family dynamics and my relationship dynamics, and how I also navigated my identity in different spheres as I've moved forward in my life. Transforming Manhood I released in 2019, and this book nearly killed me to write. I went deep. I went into what we see our current American culture really struggling with. I went deep into trying to find why we have those struggles. And it's with language and assigning language or labels to another human being or to an issue. We can't do that because language takes on different meanings depending on your region, the context, culture, your age, your individual experience, your individual understanding of the word. It will never bring us universally together. And this is one of the reasons why our country at this point is also divided 50-50, right?
Yes.
It's just ridiculous. It's maddening.
It is. I was infuriated when I saw that presidential election map. I felt unsafe at that time.
Nothing feels safe, right? I live in a state where our governor just declared this state a sanctuary for guns. And yet yesterday we just had someone killed in a mall by a gun. So here in Omaha, like, it's ridiculous. It's just, we need maturity and we need human guidance that comes from empathy and love.
Absolutely. And I think that putting a label on God also is the core reason that all this is happening. You've got one region that declares God to be one thing, another region that declares God to be something totally different based off the rules and regulations and traditions of their own culture. And that's why I think that religion is actually bottomless, in my opinion. And that's why all the discord is happening, because my God said this and my God says that. Well, God's just like, I didn't say that.
You
What are you
know,
talking about?
it's so funny you say that, because that's one of the reasons when I was a freshman in college that I reevaluated the way that I look at life and look at other. Well, I've always been a very mindful, thoughtful person. And I look back at my writing as a kid and how what people said about me. This is just who I am, right? But I would say that I started to look more deeply into God and thinking about religion because my freshman year, my undergraduate is in cultural anthropology, right? And so again, you see all these different creation stories and all these different ways that cultures work together and how they pass on rites of passage and that. And I was like, wow, this is so diverse.
Right. Exactly.
This is not one thing.
No, it's not. And that's what happened to me too in a religious studies class. When I took that class, it was over. I was like, wait a minute. There are too many similarities between all these stories. This is amazing. I just feel like this connection is just so, it's like we've been here before or something. I don't know. Do you feel like that?
We connect. When you open up your heart and life, one another, instead of having guardedness and defensiveness, you actually see how beautiful life is and how fun it is to hang out with each other and just talk, right?
I'll tell you something, and I've never told anybody this but my wife, and I'm going to be fully transparent. When I first came out to myself, I found out about transgender people, and I was always unsure, and I struggled with it. I was just like, I don't understand what. I don't get it. That's honestly what I thought. I'm being very, 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 very naked right now. I'm okay with it. And then when I met my wife, I talked to her about it. And she said, well, you just need some friends. That's all. I'm like, I never thought about that. So listen, Ryan. Oh, I'm about to cry. I searched for friends that were in the trans community. And I was like, God, I don't want there to be any type of disconnection from any type of person. I don't care what it is or who they are, if I don't understand it or if I do, because I know what it feels like to be treated like that. Because I know what it feels like for a person to look at me and say, oh, she's a lesbian. We don't want to have anything to do with her. But then they're missing out on somebody that is very loyal. They're missing out on somebody who's very inspirational. Someone who will have their back at the bottom of the pit of hell. If that's where life took them, I would be right. That's the type of friend I am, right? So they that's their loss. But then, Ryan, when I started to have friends in the trans community, I was like, oh, that was just a lack of exposure. That's all it was. It was just a lack of connection because I wasn't connected to a person of trans experience. I didn't know that what I was feeling was just a space. It wasn't discrimination. It wasn't me thinking I was better than the other person, but it was a space that needed to be filled with the connection and love. That's all it was. And then when I started to connect to people in the trans community, I was just like, y'all need to come on over here so I can make y'all some spaghetti. Because that's what I do when I love people. I make them spaghetti and then they never leave. Unless I kick them out. But so that was one of the most proving moments that I do have a right to speak up about people who don't understand me. That taught me that, Michelle, it's just exposure. That's it.
That, and you just brought the two most important words and what we all need to keep hearing over and over again: connection and love.
Yes.
We're all socially isolated because we are in a global pandemic.
Right.
Right. But two, even beyond that, cell phone technology, online technology, social media, all that is making us lose sight of who we are, not only ourselves, but also how we treat one another with respect. And it's just really problematic, and it's doing a great disservice to our children and our younger generations, and it's doing a disservice to us adults who try to chase fame or celebrityism or money versus being a good person and helping others.
Yes, that's where richness is. That's where the wealth in life occurs. That's where it happens, because money is fleeting. It can be here today, gone tomorrow.
Exactly.
Know that I helped somebody when they couldn't help themselves. That's what gives me satisfaction, period. And I am definitely going to have you back just to have some conversation about life, because I feel like we have the same type of heart. This has been a pleasure, and this conversation has fed my soul today. So it's kind of like a super slow Sunday. Sorry, Oprah.
It's my church. That's what it feels like for me. So,
Right.
absolutely.
Well, again, we're going to have you back. Thank you again. And everyone, please make sure that you check out in the body of the YouTube. I'm going to list links to all of Ryan's books and also his website so you can hear him speak if he's in a town near you. And guys, make sure you check out my website at girlaftergodsheart.com and my book on Amazon, a God, a lesbian, and the space in between. Oh, you can't see it. All right. It's on Amazon. But tune in again, you guys, for some good old MJ's Quiet Corner conversations. All right, have a good one. Bye-bye.